Hi everyone, Mac here from Mad Lions, and I'm here today with Tim.
Hello, I am the team manager, and we're going to be talking a little bit about logistics
Let's
and
get into
planning
it.
mostly, but that's the same.
What's the role of a team manager?
Mostly I bridge. I bridge the gap between the different departments and make sure that everything kind of runs smoothly and as much as possible that everyone gets to do what they want while still doing what they have to, which isn't always easy. Right, I'll split into mine then. What's the general schedule leading up to a split, like the boot camps and everything? How do you deal with that?
So we normally reverse engineer, so we'll start from the date that we want to play. Let's say we start, I don't know when we start the summer split, let's say it's like, I don't know, mid-June or something like that. Then we'll say, okay, how many days of practice do we want? So we want, I don't know, let's say it's 2 weeks of practice roughly. Because I don't think you want to do 3-4 weeks of practice in a row with no competition, because you end up stagnating and not having like anything to check your progress against. You know, you want to actually have a match to see how well you're progressing. So I actually don't believe that having super long periods of practice is great. So we say, okay, we want 2 weeks of practice there. How many days do we want for team building? We want 3-4 days, let's say for example, of activities for team building, things to go out and do, performance days, stuff like that, to get outside, get some sunshine, do some sport, all of this type of stuff, go and do something fun. How many days are we likely to have that are kind of taken up by content, camera days, interviews, whatever, things like this, or in COVID times, quarantines as well, and then work backwards from there and then figure out how many days we want and then book it in.
You say book it in, but that sounds like a lot of work for me.
Yeah, you book it in.
Well, yeah.
How do you bring together all the needs of the departments? How do you bridge?
Bridge, well, a lot of the time it's figuring out, like if I left it to marketing, you guys would be activating all the time. If I left it to the players, all they would ever do is play. And if I left it to you, all you'd ever do is coach and train and train and train. So I have to find that like happy medium where we sort of get everything we need. And obviously that requires a lot of planning, a lot of systems ahead of time. And mostly that's actually what it is. It's building systems that when we then start, we can just lean on and they will sort of automate a lot of the process. And that is planning and making sure things are where they need to be ahead of time so we can transition from one to the other.
Okay, fair enough. My turn.
Yeah, oh, it's yours, isn't it? So, all right, this is a good one. How do you go about integrating new players onto the team? Because we tend to take on we tend to take on the talent. Like, how do you integrate them?
Honestly, a lot of it is just by making sure that we understand them a bit as a person, we understand what their needs are, and so socially we try to make sure that they get whatever food it is that they need as an individual. You know, some people want to be in small groups, some people want to be in large groups, some people like doing sports outside, some people prefer board games, some people drink alcohol, some people don't, right? There are lots of differences there, so we try to make sure that we know what those preferences are for each player and that we find a happy medium for all the players, and that we can make sure that actually, you know, that they get to know each other, doing things that they enjoy, and then usually that develops a certain level of trust between them in game, I think. And then aside from that, a lot of it is just about getting to know them in game, which is honestly the much easier part to do. You get a feeling for someone when you're playing with them, when you're watching them play, about what it is that they want to do, how it is they like to communicate. Those things are honestly easier, I think, than the out of game things.
Sounds very reasonable. I'm up.
All right. So what are the key aspects when planning the start of a split?
Well, a bit like I mentioned before, it's building systems. It's finding out and kind of predicting what the team is going to need and then setting it up. And catering is one that often shows up. Cleaning is a thing people surprisingly don't think about. And then there is a lot of equipment that needs to be sent around preemptively. We need to make sure we have all the backups. We need to make sure that we have all the new jerseys, you know, all the swag. And all these things need to be there ahead of time. And we need to also know during the split, what do we do? How do we roll it out? How do we kind of set these things up? So it's mostly just a lot of calendar planning.
Yeah, and having all the stuff in the right place.
It helps.
Yeah. Especially last year, because obviously we did lots of travel last year, right? So it ended up being like, okay, now we have to ship all of our stuff from Iceland back to Berlin, or like, you know, this split we're going to be doing a boot camp in Madrid, right? So making sure that everyone has their merch and their headset and their mouse that they like, and all of their
exactly.
things.
And I'm quite grateful that there are people who take care of that stuff, kind of stuff outside of me, because otherwise I'd have to carry it. But we get to ship it, which is great.
There you go.
So, key points in preparing for a new split, like coaching staff. How do you guys get into it?
I think honestly a lot of that is kind of intuition. Like it really depends on the moment. It depends on what we know went wrong last split, or what we know we want to work on, or what we know that individual players struggled with. So generally speaking, we'll have kind of an end of split meeting and say, okay, these are the things that went well, these are the things we want to replicate, these are the things that went poorly, and these are the things that we want to actually change. What are some ideas? Let's spitball, let's throw some ideas at the wall and see what sticks about different ways that we could change that. So I don't know, should we change our review structure? Should we change how much one-to-one we do? Should we change the way that we phrase certain things to people? Should we change the number of days that we scrim, the times that we scrim, how long we scrim? All of these things are just things that we consider based on what works for our players individually and our team. Because even when you change one or two players, it's like a completely fresh team. So all of that just has to be constantly reevaluated.
Yeah.
All right. So how do you plan the split, like kind of during the split, and then actually execute on all of those plans that we make?
Again, it's back to systems. The secret to management, don't tell anyone, by the way. The secret to management is actually that you have to build all the systems ahead of time. Because once the split starts, you want to have build structures and like set up logistics that, a bit like a ship without a captain, is still going to go the right way for a while. You kind of want to be able to lean back on the work you did ahead of the split. If you have to start inventing solutions to problems while the split is active, then that ship is on fire and nobody's going to have a very good time.
We actually call that firefighting. Even like for like many years we've called that firefighting, and it applies coaching wise as well as it does management wise. But I think for both sides we really want things to run automatically, in a sense that we've decided how things are going to run and what the obstacles are going to be prior to when they actually come up, and then we just execute rather than having to, like you said, think up solutions on our feet.
That's it's not fun.
Firefighting not fun.
How does a regular preseason day look?
Preseason day, it really depends. I mean, do you mean like kind of during the boot camp? Because I mean, obviously
I would say boot camp, like a bit like what we're doing, because preseason outside of boot camp is people get some of that rare time off. There's no system to that, but let's assume like boot camp, preseason, how are we kind of staying competitive without being in the thick of it?
I mean, boot camp is one of the times where you actually have a lot of time. It doesn't often feel like you have time. You come to the boot camp and you think like, God, we're going to get so much done. We're going to do the team building stuff, and we're going to have time to do all of this stuff, like reviewing games from the past and going through all this like really in-depth stuff. It never feels like that much time, but you do have more time to do a lot of the more quality of life things during boot camp, rather than the on-the-fly problem solving or the planning for next week or the adaptation for the new patch. So those are the times when you can, for example, let's say you have a player that struggles playing a certain type of champion. Those times where you're not actively competing but you're preparing are a great time to really get into the thick of it and say, okay, we're going to play like 20 games of this champion that you've always struggled with, or this type of champion that you've struggled with, and we're going to tell you, we're going to figure out what it is that you need to do to actually succeed on this. Like really long-term growth products or projects, those are the best times to do it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Okay, how do you create a good practice environment for the team?
Well, that one's really interesting, especially in the global pandemic situation we've been in lately. We kind of have to set up something where the players, especially the newer ones who haven't been around the stage, can be stressed a little bit, so that they're at least remotely ready for stage playing. We're working a lot on that right now, which is going to be interesting. Hopefully less relevant, but we are kind of investing in that. And then it's about obviously finding that structure between when there is play, when there is food, when there is physical training, when we do activities, and kind of separating the spaces in which we do these things so that the mentality changes. Logistically, it's about how do we set that up? What do we need? The equipment needs to be ordered, stuff like that. But that one is actually one of the easier parts physically to execute on. But it's a lot more interesting to work on than a lot of the other problems, because we have to try to figure out the psychology behind what the players need. Yeah,
I think there's actually a really difficult balance to achieve in terms of it's really important to have a certain amount of routine in the day, and like, you know, things like eating at the same time every day is really, I think that's something that we actively want, because it helps us to plan around. But having the exact same structure for everything every single day becomes very repetitive and very boring very quickly. So there's a balance that we need to strike there.
You have to strike like organized chaos in there, just a little bit.
Yeah, you don't want structured fun.
No, exactly.
No one likes structured fun.
How important is a good dynamic between the coaching staff?
Oh, super important, super important. I think for me, like I try very hard to surround myself with people that compensate for all of the weaknesses that I have as a coach and as a person, right? So I'm
funny
really
people.
bad. This guy, honestly. Can we get a new manager in here? So you completely threw me.
Oh, actually, want me to start again?
Okay.
I think I should actually now. I think we've gone.
So I try to surround myself with people that actually balance me out and can like make up for some of my deficiencies. For example, I'm actually not very good at organizing things super far ahead of time. I'm very much an in the moment person and I tend to get lost in what I'm doing. So Cass, for example, is really good logistically and is really good at understanding, okay, if we do this at this time, then maybe this person might have difficulty with that because he gets back from the gym at this time, whatever it happens to be. And he's very good at coordinating with you and with Till on making sure that everything actually runs smoothly. So I let him take care of that very much, you know. Pad is fantastic at preparation, and so I deal much more with the kind of day-to-day handling of what are we looking at today, what are our goals for today, etc. And I leave a lot of the scouting and things like that to him, so that I have more time to deal with the things that I'm good at. And I think my niche is very much the kind of emotional handling of the team and the like people management part of it and the overall big picture structure. So we tend to complement each other quite well. What do you need to do well as a team manager?
I mean, a team helps.
Yeah.
It does make it easier. Mostly, though, it's the tools. It's the tools to get things to and from. Like looking at our current situation, we're currently in Spain. We're boot camping. We're setting up and all this stuff, and getting things sent. Like there's a tremendous amount of sending things back and forth. There's a tremendous amount of shipping gear and whatever. And if things like GLS would allow me to ship players, I would do it, because it would make my life easier. But thankfully, we can ship everything else. But that is actually a huge aspect of our day-to-day. So I think having those tools, having those things set up makes it easier. And then it's the goals at the end of the day as well. You know, like what are we trying to achieve? Winning the split, obviously. How do we do that? Getting you guys the tools you need. And most of it comes down to equipment from my side. It's just making sure that you always have the environment and the equipment that you need to be able to perform.
Breaking it down into steps.
Yeah.
Big goal, step 1, step 2, step 3.
Step
How do we
one.
get there?
Yeah,
What do
basically.
we need on the way?